Okay, today we are going to do this diamond plate material. So I got this diamond plate material off of textures.com. So let me just pull that up. All right, so if you go to textures.com, you can sign in there. And I have, let's see, I think I went to metal. And there's just tons of different tileable textures and just high quality textures you can grab off here. They're not completely ready to use. Some of them are, so this painted one is the texture that I used. You can hear my little girl in the background there. Okay, so I grabbed this one, and then I just downloaded that. So this small version. All right, so now that I have it in Photoshop, I have already went through the process of doing all the textures for this. Okay, so I have the Spec, the Bare Diffuse for the metal, the Paint Diffuse, which I made it red, and you can change the color of this in either in Photoshop or in Maya later. And then I have my Rust Diffuse, which I made with a gradient map, which I will show you how to do that. And then I made a paint control signal, which is controlling where the paint is and where the paint isn't. So this black area is going to be where the paint is and the white area is going to be where it isn't, or it's flipped depending on how you are mixing it. You can do that in the Hypershade as well. And then I have this rust control signal, which is controlling where the rust is and where it isn't. This is probably need to be flipped too, but just a black and white map. And then a bare metal control, which is just another signal that I use just to, just in case I wanted an extra signal. Sometimes I'll make another one, just maybe I'm going to use it in the Hypershade for something. And then I made this displacement mid, which is just a map that is only bumping out each diamond plate. We actually drew, it's not perfectly lined up, but I actually drew little shapes and then just tiled them down to bump each one of those sections up, which I'll show you why I did that. So, all right. So let's just go over how I actually built each one of these. So usually what I'll do is I'll build the diffuse first, actually the paint diffuse. So I have this paint diffuse here. Let's break down what I did here. So what I did was I copied this background layer. I'll put this up here. That's where I started. And I zoom in a little bit, and then I go up to image adjustments and shadows and highlights. And I will mess with these sliders until I'm trying to get rid of all the shadow information, how I've talked about before. And then I'll try to get rid of some of the highlight information as well, because this map is going to be color information only. So the render does not want shadow information or specular information in this map. It only wants color information. So you can think of it, when you're making maps like this, you need to think what the render is actually looking for. So it just wants information for each one of these maps. It doesn't want like a picture. So this is color information. It's like this is a finished photograph, or this is a photograph, right? There's these shiny, so the light is casting in a direction like this. Whoops. Like, why is that not showing? Oh, because I put it in there. Okay, like this. The light source is like here, and it's casting shadows this direction. You can see this is a shadow. This is a shadow, and then there's the highlight on this side. So we want to get rid of that by doing this. Actually, accidentally drew on that. Okay. So let's say after I do the shadow and highlight, I pretty much get it to a place like this. It's still got some highlights in it that I want to get rid of. So I did a levels, and how I did that levels is I did I wanted to select color range, see. Let me turn this off first. There we go. Okay, now we'll turn it back on to grayscale. Okay. Then I'm just turning down the fuzziness. So I selected the white areas when I click this. And then as I turn down the fuzziness, it's selecting more and more just those white areas. So something like that. And then I made a adjustment layer down here, levels. And then I just messed with this until I started getting rid of those white highlights. Because I don't want those highlights in my color map. So I did an adjustment, something like that. So this is the one that I ended up with. All right. So now that I've got this adjustment layer, now I wanted to change the color, the overall color. So I just turned it into a red color. You could do this in Maya, which I ended up doing anyway. I just did it here for whatever reason. So I made it into a red one. So I just, I masked out, so if I hit shift and left click, what it does is it turns off that mask. So I don't want to change the color of the metal yet. So I masked out the diamonds by just doing a color selection on the gray, the same way that I did a color selection here. So I think, let's see, if I click on this layer, go to color range, there, I got a selection something like this, and then did the hue saturation to get that. And then I did another hue saturation just to further clamp some of the areas that I wasn't getting. So you can see I got a little bit more of these areas. And I just did another color range with the hue saturation, and then I hit colorize, and then I just adjusted the lightness and the saturation, and then I changed the hue. So I just made it like that red color, turned down the saturation a little bit. Then I turned up the lightness just to match it a little closer. And then I did another one, which was a similar thing. I was just trying to get more and more dialed into having this entire thing painted red. So I just kind of in steps went step by step. And then the last one was I think I might have done like so I did another color selection here. And then I, let's see what the normal, I think I just did a color. Yeah, so I just selected those diamond plates with color range again, and then just dumped a red color into it. Then I turned on overlay because I still want some of the detail there. And then I just turned down the opacity slightly. So now this looks like it's a roughly painted version of the diamond plate. So this is originally what we had, and this is the painted diffuse. And then I wanted to do a bare diffuse, which is basically the metal. So this is like what the metal would look like if it didn't have any paint on it, but just diffuse, no specularity or shadows. So it was just the same process. And all I did was I copied my diffuse that I'd made, the original one. And then I just turned the saturation. So it was like, you know, basically it was the same thing that I had down here. I just turned the saturation all the way down. Then I went in here and messed with the saturation here. And I left a little bit of color in there because it would have a little bit of color. You don't want it to be completely black and white. Okay, so then I had that one. So basically I just copied this and then messed with the hue and saturation, things like that to get that. Then I made the spec, which is just a crunchy version of this bare diffuse. So I just copied my bare diffuse and desaturated it. So you can see it has a little less color in it. And then I did some levels to make it a little bit crunchy because I want more details, just to break up the highlight a little bit more. Then for this rust diffuse, I did something special. So I copied this spec layer. So I'll copy that and I'll call this demo rust. Okay, so what you could do is you can do a gradient map. And what that does, a gradient map does, is it maps colors to each value in this image. So if I said, first I'll show you. I'll go up to Image Adjustments, Gradient Map, and I have this demo rust selected. So you can see what it's doing is it's mapping. Let's do a color that's really easy to know. Okay, I'll do red, and then on this one, I'll do white. So what it does is it's mapping this red color to black, or the darkest colors. And then it's mapping this white color to white, these lightest colors. And you can see that as it, so this white is completely mapped to 1, red is completely mapped to black, and then any gradient in between, it'll map a mixture of that value. So if I did a middle value here, let me try to make a, let's do like an orange color, because you know we want this to be. So first what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a noise. I'll turn up HSB. What a noise does is it randomly generates a bunch of dithered colors in here, and you can turn down the roughness of it, which basically just increases the amount. So when the roughness is set to 0, it's mapping one color to another color. And as I'm turning it up, it's just adding more and more little gradients all the way down. So what this HSB here is, so it's, I think by default it's set to RGB. I always set it to HSB so I can control the saturation, the value, and the color independently. So what these sliders do is, let's turn down the roughness a little bit. It constricts what colors are in this range of values. So if I only wanted green and the sky blue colors, I would set the ranges like this. And if I wanted the saturation to only be in this range, this is the saturation level. And if I wanted the lightness and darkness to be in this range, it would only be in that range as well. And once I have these settings dialed in, I can hit randomize. And what it does is it maintains the color that I made here, but it just starts to move these ramp positions so that these colors get mapped to different positions. So for a rust color, we kind of want like a red and a yellows, okay? And I can take down my saturation a little bit. I'm gonna bring up my lightness a little bit. And my darkness here. So kind of this range. And when I start hitting randomize, I'm gonna get this range of color, this range of saturation and value randomly distributed throughout this range here. So I can get something that I like, something like that. And this is going to take a lot of trial and error when you're using these types of maps to get exactly what you want. So I'm just looking for like some type of rust color, something like that. Because and I'm not going to, I don't need it to be super perfect, because it's going to be like a very, this is just one way of doing it too. You could just go in and color correct the other one to be where you want it. But I just wanted to kind of show you a different way of getting some color. All right. So let's say I'm happy with that. I can turn down the roughness level. Or if I turn it up, it'll be super crunchy with a lot of different colors. And this is fewer values as the roughness goes down. So something like that. All right. And you can see reverse the order, but we like that. So here's the rust that I ended up with. It'll just take you some trial and error to get it where you want. This is the one that we just made. So I'm just going to use the original one that I had. It'll probably just take you a little more manual labor to get it to work. All right, for this paint control, what I did was I just looked at, I think it probably took it from probably this original one. So what I did is I just went to select, color range, and just trying to select that that range of color. I'm going to make sure that I had that layer selected. Okay. All right. And then I'm going to fill a, let's see, white color. Make another layer, deselect, and this empty layer, I'm going to fill it with black. Now, if I combine these layers together, the black background and this white top one, I can now mess with the levels on these. So I'm just trying to get a rough paint signal that I can use as a control in Arnold. So I'm just going to blur it a little bit just because I don't want it to be super crunchy. All right. All right, something like that would work. So it's a similar map. This one was a little bit crunchier actually. But yeah, you can just mess with it until you get a value that you like. Okay, so for this this last signal, what I did was I went to this layer and I just made a new layer. I went to the lasso tool and I just did like a rough outline of this little diamond shape. And sorry, my daughter's freaking out. And then I made this little diamond shape and I just filled it in with black. And then I just held down Alt and I drag and it just duplicates it automatically. And then I just repeated this process for the entire grid. And once that was all done, I had, I would copy and paste and then, you know, just keep doing it. Something like that. Once I had something that was all finished out, and then I made the background white, and then I blurred it a little bit. Actually, in the final one that I did, for some reason it wasn't saved here. I blurred it a little bit more, and then I multiplied it on top. So I actually darken's probably good, just to add a little bit more to it. Okay, so that would be my displacement mid. All right, so we have all of our maps now. We have the paint diffuse, the bare diffuse, the spec, the rust diffuse, a paint control, a rust control, and a bare metal control, which I don't even think I ended up using. All right, so then I bake all these out by just go to save as and then go through each one and just bake them out individually. All right, so once we are done with these maps here, I'm gonna go into Maya and I just made this ground plane here. And what I'm gonna do is just make a little bit of a lip on here. So I'm just selected all these edges and I'm just moving this down a little bit so that it's kind of just has a little bit of a lip. Something like that. I'm just gonna add an edge. All right. All right, perfect. Now I'm just gonna lay out the UVs really quickly. Go to UV, my UV editor here. And just to clear it out, I'm gonna do a planar projection down the y-axis. Then I'm gonna select UV, unfold, the whole thing. There we go. How I usually have this set up is, let's pull this, unfold, option box. Yeah, there used to be a way to, okay, doesn't matter. Anyway, it used to be a way that you could just select a single vert and then unfold it and just pin a single vert and then unfold it, but it doesn't look like it has that anymore, weirdly enough. If anybody knows how to turn that back on, let me know, because I actually prefer it. So anyway, if that doesn't work, you can just select the whole shell and it'll work the same way. All right, so I'm gonna select this, just get this into a range that I like. Perfect. Now let's see what it actually looks like on this here. All right, minimal stretching. Looks okay. All right. Close out the UVs. Okay, now what we want to do is let's make a camera. Look through my camera. I'm going to go to View, Camera Settings, Resolution Gate, and also, actually, I'm going to change my resolution here of the camera just so that I can render a 1K square, because this is like a square object and I don't want to render more than I have to. So I can just render something like this. All right, and then we'll just do fill. All right, perfect. Run the IPR, share the camera, and let's always name everything. So render cam, and then my ground plane will be diamond plate. Diamond plate 01, perfect. Now what we need to do is create a new material. So you might have seen me do this. If you don't know how to do that, you just hit the minus and plus key on your keyboard and it will just increase the range. Sometimes if your rotation is like that, you have a really hard time to rotate it. But if you bring it out here, you can control a little bit better. So anyway, just if you're wondering. So now let's left click on the object, and then I'm going to right click, go down to assign new material. Let's make an AI standard material. I just type in the filter there to bring this here. So AI standard surface. So over in my attribute editor, you can see I just made it here. So let's call this diamond plate diffuse material. Wait, let's call this painted. Paint. So first we're going to do each layer that we made. So we're going to do a painted layer, a bare metal layer, and a rust layer. And then we'll be mixing those together so that we can do some interactive breakup. So I kind of break down materials usually as how they were manufactured or how they were originally before anything was done to them. So you would have the bare metal diamond plate out of the factory, and then you would have the painted version where somebody would actually go and paint it. And when it was first created, it'd be super clean, but as people walk on it and it gets worn over the years, you'll have different wear patterns, which will make those wear patterns interactively instead of baking them in. So first, let's do the painted one. So I'm going to go just turn the weight up to 1 for now, and then go to color, and let's map the diffuse. So I have my diamond plate here, and I have already made versions of all these, or I baked all these out earlier. So let's go to the paint diffuse, which I have as red. All right, we'll call this paint diffuse. All right. And then we will go to, I'm just going to delete the history on this. Freeze transformation. Just that I have a clean attribute editor list. So it's just my transform node, my shape node, and then my material. All right, now I'm going to go to specular, go to the color, click on that. File. Let's see, I have this spec here. Excellent. All right. Usually you should be working in like a linear workflow. For this one I didn't, just because I don't want to add. There's plenty of things out there about color space, but for this it's fine. We're just using sRGB. But usually if you're doing a linear workflow, you're going to want to use raw here, so that it can bring in all the bits per channel and things like that. Okay, so anyway, it's 8-bit anyway, so the source file is 8-bit, so don't worry about that now. But okay, so that's sRGB. Great. Let's type diamond plate spec. Okay, so we have 2 maps plugged in so far. So let's look at them in the Hypershade. So I'm going to bring Hypershade over here. Let's make a new tab here. Call this diamond plate paint. All right. So I'm going to just that render cam, get that out of there. Okay, so far we have our diamond plate paint material, the standard surface for that. This little button here, this will turn on a grid, which I do like having. Just for some reason, visually it helps me. And then this one will snap to the grid if you want that, so that everything snaps to a certain area. But usually I just kind of let it free flow like that. All right, so we have the painted diffuse and we have the spec. And one thing I want to do is I want to daisy chain all the out UVs to all the other maps. That way that I can scale them and they all scale together. So let's click on this one and we'll call this diamond plate placement. All right, cool. So that way we can use that for all of them in the future as we start pulling them in, because there's a lot of them. All right, so this first diamond plate, let's actually apply this. I think it's already applied, but okay. So I just middle mouse drag that onto there, or you can left click on this object, go to right click and then go to assign existing. You'll see it there. Or you can go select this object, right click on this and assign material to viewport. So there's a lot of ways to do things. And you can also just select it here and then do assign material. Okay, so let's actually see what the render is. Actually, it should be black because we have no lights. So let's make a light. So I'm going to go to Arnold, Lights, Sky Dome, and pull my attribute editor over here. And then I'll go to color, and we need to assign an HDR image, so an IVL. So an image-based lighting. Hit File, and then I'll click on this little folder here. And I actually have, I don't know if I have HDRs in here. Yes, I do. Okay. Let's see which one I want to use. We'll use this one for now. So I'm going to, since this is an EXR and it has float point values, we need to set the color space to raw instead of sRGB. So I'll set that. Move that over here and let's render it. Okay. So the first thing that I notice is that the scale is way too big. So let's click on this and let's change the scale. So let me pull my Hypershade over here and you see the diamond plate placement node, and then it'll be active in my view part over here. So I see the repeat UV when I select on that. So let's put that as probably too much, 3 and 3. So that will uniformly scale those diamond plates to something. It's a little bit hard to see because we don't have any other maps going on right now. So let's plug in the next set of maps. If we haven't plugged in the displacement yet, we're going to do that a little bit later as it goes in. But actually, let me just plug it in quickly so you can actually see it. I'm just going to select this and get rid of that out of this little scene here. Let's go ahead and save this before it crashes. It's a good habit to do that. So diamond plate demo. Just call it that. Okay, so let's plug in the displacement. So you can see here, I select my AI standard surface, and we will call this the diamond plate paint shading. We'll just call it SG for shading group. All right, displacement matte file, and then it'll make this displacement shader. So we'll call this diamond plate paint disp shader. And then go to its file. We've got to open the file here. Navigate to where I saved it out. And I think it's here. Yeah, I think it's this one. All right. Now that we have that set up, there's one more step we have to do, actually. Oh, also what we have to do is to take this displacement placement, or this diamond plate placement, and we need to plug it into our new displacement map into its UV coordinate. And the reason is it needs to line up with these other maps and they need to scale together. So I can just delete this one so that this one's plugging into all three. So I'll rerun this, update my scene. And another thing that we have to do is we have to click on the object and we have to change some of its shape node settings. So I'm going to go to its shape node here, go down to the Arnold tab, Then I'm going to scroll down to subdivision and displacement attributes. And I want to set the type to Cat Clark. And let's make the iterations 3. Let's see how that works. All right, so we can see how many subdivisions it has. We can go to debug shading and then go to wireframe, hit play, and it'll actually show you how much wireframe or how many divisions it has now. So let me update this scene real quick. And the amount is way too much right now for this height. So let's do like 0.05. So that's just setting the amount of displacement that's going to be displacing up. All right. So, and that's whenever it's in the shape node where you set that. And this is a global handle. So you could actually go into the file here and do an AI range node and manually turn that down a little bit. So let me put the input here, take an R value. You can either do a luminance conversion to turn this RGB value into a single channel, or you can just grab the R channel and put it straight in. That works as well. Okay, so right now this probably render exactly the same. I'm going to turn off debug shading really quick. And let's select this AI range. Oh, first I'll select the object again and then go to its shape node, turn my height back to 1. And if I update the full scene, it should get really big again. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to select my AI range and I'm going to hit 1 just to shrink it down because we're going to only be messing with it in the attribute editor here. So 0 means is the black value, which goes in, and then 1 is the white value, which goes up. So if I lower this number, this is the output min and the output max. So this is like the levels range, and this is like the whiteness value and the blackness value. So if I bring this down, this globally brings down the entire value of the whites into whatever this. So if everything is a value of 1, if I hit a 0.8, now that's the maximum value of white that it can have is 0.8. So if I take this whole image down to like a 0.1, that means that all the black values still stay black, but it kind of took the entire map range down to 1. So if I isolate this map, you can actually see what's happening here. So this is what it was as a value of 1, and then as I'm bringing it down, it's just bringing those white values into a gray range. All right, cool. So that's probably about where I want it, because these diamond plates only lift off just a little bit. All right, great. So we've got, right now, all we have plugged in is we have our paint diffuse. I'll just turn on this isolate select. So we have our painted diffuse, our paint spec, and we have our displacement map. And that's the only thing that's plugged in there. So for the displacement color, I actually did want to change the color on here. So I'm going to pause the render here so I don't crash. Let's save. And I'm going to make an AI color correct node. So I'm going to take the out color of this paint diffuse, put it in the input. And I should probably name this. So let's call this diamond plate CC diffuse, CC for color correct. All right. So as I have it selected, let's turn this. Oh, first let's connect it. So I have it into the input, and then I'll take the out color and put it into the base color of this material here. So if I hit play and I isolate, hasn't changed yet. So now that I have the color correct node selected, I can actually start changing the color. So let's put this into the yellow range, which is similar to what we actually started with. So let's do like a 7.5, which should make it a little bit oranger. Take down the saturation just a little bit. 0.9. 0.98. All right, cool. So now let's see what it looks like. So this is what our yellow painted diffuse layer looks like for the diamond plate. All right, great. So next thing we need to do is actually this is way too shiny for what I was looking for. So I'm going to go back to my, oh, I saw the color collection. Click on the main material, bring up this main material, and then in my roughness value, I'm just going to turn the roughness up. Another thing we need to do is turn on our AOVs so that we can see what's going on here. So I'm going to go to my display settings, go to AOVs tab, go to built-in, and then I'm going to put a couple AOVs in here. So we'll do diffuse direct, just hit the right arrow that goes over, indirect, and it goes into these active AOVs tab. So all of these are inactive, but they're available. And these are the AOV groups. They just have different sets of AOVs. So the built-in ones here. So available AOVs, active AOVs. So we just have these two active. And I'm going to make the specular direct and specular indirect active as well. So these are the ones that I start out with usually. And I know I'm not going to have any subsurface in this scene, so we're not going to worry about it. Okay, so now that I have these active, the first time that I hit the IPR, now they're active in this tab. So now we can break out each one individually. So I'm going to look at specular direct when I'm messing with this roughness value. So, and I'm just looking for a good roughness value just for the paint layer. And I want to make it quite a bit more rough than the bare metal layer, just so that there's a good amount of contrast between the two. So you can't really see too many. It's a pretty blurry reflection from those. As I turn this down, you can see that it gets like a really shiny reflection, but we actually want it to be quite a bit blurrier. So it's a little bit more matte. Okay. You can see I can just load that a little bit faster. Okay, so I'm going to pause that and let's open up our Hypershade again. And I'm pretty happy with this first paint layer. So I'm going to make another tab and we'll call this the Diamond Plate Bare Metal. Okay, so I'll make a new AI standard surface. And let's call this the Diamond Plate Bare Material. So the bare metal material is what this one is. So let's attach this to this object down here. So I'm just going to click here, assign material. So I just selected that object again, and then just right click this, assign a material that's selected. All right. So now we have this new material. What we're going to do is go through the same process. I'll show you how to do it in the Hypershade, just so I can show you both ways. So I did it in the attribute editor before, but we can also do it directly from the Hypershade. So I'm going to hit tab and type file and bring in a file texture, which is this node here. And I'm going to get rid of this 2D place node because we're going to use the same one that we used over here, this diamond plate placement. So I don't want to copy this because it already exists in my utilities here. Actually, what I want to do, I think it's utilities. Yeah, my diamond plate is there. So I'm going to select this, go back to this other tab, and I still have it selected. And I'm going to hit add selected node to graph. That way it's just using the exact same node instead of creating a new one. And then I just plug it straight into my new file texture. And now I can actually apply that shader. And this is only going to be for all the ones that I did in this format. If you bring in like a completely different texture, you wouldn't do it this way. Okay, so I'm going to use the diamond plate bare diffuse. All right. And then I'm going to plug that into my base color. And let's make another file texture. And same process, plug this into this one. All right. And I'm going to use the same spec node actually, because I can just run an AI range in there to change it from the other one. So let's take this out color, put it into specular color here. All right. And for this one, I want to use the metalness. So because this is going to be a metal object. So let's, whoops, accidentally docked that. All right. So I'm going to run the IPR. this super shiny object. That looks like it unmapped my diamond plate bear. That's weird. All right, so what we're gonna do is I will click on diamond plate bear and graph. All right, so now this is regraphed. I don't know why that got rid of that before. All right, so I have my diffuse, my spec, and let's select this, and I want to increase the roughness a little bit. Not too much. And if you mess with this metalness value, it goes from just being a spec to actually being like, you know, a reflection. I turn this down. This is just like specularity, and this is actually metallic. And what it does is it evaluates what your color map is, and it'll color the highlight depending on what the color map is. So if this was like a bluish metal material, you would want to have a blue color in here. I can actually demonstrate that if I just did a constant. See color constant, and let's make this blue. Now if I map this color constant into my base color, it will make this metal return a blue highlight, almost like it's some type of treated metal. So just keep that in mind. Whatever your diffuse is, when you're using metalness, is going to drive the highlight color of that object. And the specular color is a little bit different. So if I turn down, actually the specular color does not have an effect when you're using metalness. Maybe the specular color does. Let me just make sure. Yeah, it doesn't have an effect. So it's just overriding it. So just keep that in mind. All right, so I'm going to take this, put it back into this base color. And let's use this this diffs metal spec. And we're going to use that to drive the metalness. So there's nothing mapped in there right now. For some reason, it doesn't by default show the metalness in these nodes here. Let me see if I can unlock it. No, it won't. The only way that I can get it to be viewed is if I, let's see, that's first. Okay. We're going to have to map something to it. So I'm just going to do like let's just do a ramp. Just so that I can unlock that node. So there we go. So you can see it there. All right, so what I want to do is take my spec node down here that got flung all the way down here for some reason. And I'm going to plug it into the, so you can see the metalness is active now. So if I hit 4. If I hit 4, it's the default. If I hit 1, it's clamped. And then if I hit 2, it'll show you all the nodes that it currently has plugged in. So that's how I unlocked, since I have this ramp plugged in. If I delete this ramp, then this would disappear. So while this is active, I'll just override it. So you can see now it's overriding it. So let's go to the specular direct, and I want to run an AI range node through this so that I can control it a little bit better. So I'm going to take my out color, input that. Now let's turn on this this here so we can actually see what it's doing. So here's my spec color, and I'm just running the RGB value into this AI range, and then I'm just taking the, since this is a green node and all red nodes take an RGB color, and then these green nodes take a single channel value. So I'm only just taking red because R, G, and B in this case, they're all black. They're the same map. So I'm taking this AI range node and I'm plugging that into my metalness. And now that I have that AI range, I'll call this diamond plate metalness range. So Now when I start messing with this, I have it isolate selected for that Metalness Range node that's plugged into Metalness, just so we can see that it's working now. Now if I turn that off and I start actually looking at it live, you can see that I'm messing with this values. Probably want to just right. Oh, I guess that specular color is having a response. Oh, that's because I'm mixing this range node. Okay. So you can see off screen here, I have I turned that blue off. So if I turn that on, you can see what's happening is that my metalness node is affecting, as I'm turning down the metalness, is turning on the specular. So if I took this AI range node and let's put it back to 1. And if I turn both of these values to 1, it should turn off the blue entirely. Because now it's only affecting the metalness. Let's see. Let me turn this up a little bit. Probably don't even need to map that, but okay. Let's turn the weight down on this. Then when we mess with the metalness, then it'll get a little bit darker. Just flip these. That way it's just like some areas have some diffuse contribution and some specular. I think it's just crunching this down a little bit. All right. So let's, I mean, you can just keep messing with that to get it into a range that you like. So I'm just going to bring that back up. All right. So we have our bare diffuse, our bare spec, and then we have our range node here. And this is a pretty simple node. So now what we want to do is we want to mix this paint and this bare material together. So what I can do is, let me do an AI switch. What this node does is it allows you to put multiple inputs, they could either be color inputs or they can be shader inputs. So I'm just gonna select that, put it on there. So you see all these inputs here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it has an out color. So let me call this my metal switch. And this is just so I can go back and forth and show you the different materials before I start mixing them together. So I'm going to take my diamond plate bare and then take the out color, put it into input 1. Actually, let's put it into input 0 and then put my paint into input 1. So I'm going to select my metal switch here, go to my bare paint, and then map that one in here as well. And what did I have that set to? 0? Okay, so I'm going to take my painted version, put it into input 1. So now if I select on this node, you can see the diamond plate bare metal is here. The diamond plate paint metal is here, or material, my bad. So, and then this index switch. So 0, when it's set to 0, it will be this input. When it's set to 1, it'll be this input, and then all the way down to 19, or I think you can probably even add more. You just daisy chain another one. Okay, so just so you can see what's going on here. Let me flip this to 1. So now you can see this diamond plate painted materials in the one channel, and then I can flip it back and forth to the metal one and the painted one. Okay, great. So really quickly, I'm going to make the rust version. So let's call it diamond plate rust AI standard. Whoops. AI standard surface. All right, and this is going to be our diamond plate rust material. And I'm going to apply the rust diffuse. Oh, I shouldn't close that. Oh well, I'm going to delete this and I'm going to bring in this other diamond plate placement node again. So I just went to this diamond plate bare node, or whatever this is, layer, tab. Yeah, tab. Click that, go back to my diamond plate rust, and then just add that to my file list. Type in the UV coordinate. All right. So let's take this rust material, and I'm going to go back to my AI switch here, and I'm just going to left click on it, go back over to diamond plate rust, and then add that to this scene. And then I'm just going to take the out color and put it into input 2. Now, if I have my diamond plate switch, I'm just going to open my attribute editor again, and my channel. Accidentally close that. Okay. So now I have in my AI switch node, my metal switch, I have diamond plate bare, diamond plate paint, and diamond plate rust all hooked up. So if I hit play and I go to the cycle through all 3, you can see I have my bare metal, my painted metal, and then my rust. So let's go to my rust material because it needs a little bit of work. So I'm in my rust tab here, and I will click on the diamond plate rust. And then I have my diamond plate rust settings over here, and let's just turn the roughness way up. And then let's turn down the specular color a bit. I'll even turn the metalness up a little bit. Just messing with different settings. Okay, so that's a super basic right now. I don't really need anything crazy because it's going to be a very small contribution to the material. So you want to go in and actually make this proper rust, like put displacement and bump and all this stuff, and map in some other things. But let's go to our metal switch, and let's see all 3 now. So we have our metal, our painted, and our rust. So let's mix these together with some of the signals that I made earlier. So I'll pause the render here. And now we're not even going to use this AI switch, not for now anyway. I just wanted to kind of show you different way, or an easy way to switch back and forth between materials without having to assign each material back and forth onto it. So that's just one way that you can go through and just show different things. So I'm not going to delete it. I'm just going to remove it from this node graph. So it still exists. It's just not there anymore. So I'm going to type in AI mix shader. And this is how we're going to start actually mixing the shaders together. So I'm going to take my out color, and actually I'm going to put it into my painted layer. So I just copied it and then put it into this. I selected it and then I just added it to this node graph over here. So for I'm just gonna remove this metal switch node from this graph and take my out color, put it into shader 2 for my diamond plate paint. Select this AI mixer. Let's call this the bare metal painted mix material. Okay, just so that we know what's being mixed in here. So now I just have my painted material so far plugged into this. I will left click this, go over to my diamond plate bare tab, and then add that material to this tab. And this metal switch here, I'm going to remove that from the group as well, because we're not going to be using that right now. Take my out color, put it into shader 1. So shader 2 is the painted version. So if I actually graph this whole thing, if I select on bare painted mix material and I hit, let's see, input and output connections for this object, you can see now it's mapped my bare metal with all of its inputs and my painted with all of its inputs. So you can see both materials are plugged into and using this same diamond plate placement node I've been using before. My spec, my painted, my another spec, and then my bare diffuse. All of these things are hooked up straight into this this mixer, which is the bare metal painted mixer. So first thing I'm going to do is right now it's just going to be mixing by opacity. So it's going to do 50% mix of my bare and my painted. So let's see what that looks like. It doesn't look really that great because it's just doing a 50-50 mix. So if I click on that mixer and move this around, you can see it's just mixing back and forth. So what we want to use this blend weight for is an actual file. So let's do a hit tab here and type file texture. And we want to use this same placement node that I've been using this whole time, just so that we know that it's mapped properly to the other files that we've been using. So let me open, I think I called it paint control. Okay, great. So I have this paint control signal. And what I want to do is, because this is green, I want to use a single channel to mix in here. So I'll take the red channel, and you can see now it is mixing. So there's two ways that I can actually flip this, because I want it to actually be inverted the other way. I can either invert this image, or I can change the order of these things, how they're mixed. So if I took the bare metal, I put it in shader 2, and then I took the painted metal and put it into shader 1, it should flip the order like that. So now I have metal on these diamond plate nodules, and then I have paint on the other ones. So if I just select this, okay, so white is metal and black is paint, how this is set up. So now what we need to do is kind of break up the way that this is, like, just kind of only breaking up in this area. So also what we need to do is we need to hook up our displacement shader into this final shader mixer. So let's go into the painted. Where do we hook up the displacement shader? Here it is. I'm going to take this displacement paint shader and then just add this here. I'm not sure this is going to work like this. Sometimes a little finicky. Looks like it worked. All right, great. All right, so I kind of want to break up. Let's like tumble around the scene a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of light as well. So let's go to my Arnold tab here, go to lights, or my Arnold window, lights, and let's add an area light. And I'm just going to add like a colored light here, just so you can kind of see some different light contribution from different lights. So let's, like this. With that area light selected, let's call this the colored The color area light. And I'm going to make this a like purple color just so you can very clearly see it. Let's make the exposure like 10, 15, too light, 12. All right. Yeah, just so we can see some contribution there. All right, I'm going to pause that. Let's create a spotlight. Oh. And the scale of this is purely visual. So I just hit T, which will let you transform the aim of this light. So if I move this light, it'll just continue to maintain pointing at that direction. And I have that spotlight. Let's see. Let's do rim. Turn up the exposure at 12 first. Exposure to like 14, just so we can see that light really clearly. Turn down the cone angle, turn up the penumbra. And I'm just turning on the color temperature, making it a little bit warm. You know, and for this area light, actually, let's make it a bluish color, so we can have like that teal and orange combination. Because it's a very common color scheme in movie posters and just movies in general. Teal and orange. Just for some reason, those colors like marry together really, really well. So you'll see that a lot of different film. All right, and that background is a little bit distracting. So I'm going to select my AI sky dome. And for the visibility, I'm just going to turn the camera to 0. That way it's still rendering everything else about the HDR. It's just turning on the light. Actually, I'm going to decrease the intensity of that as well, just so we see a little bit more light contribution. So I just turned down the HDR contribution level. And I'm just going to add it to a layer so that I can't select it. All right. So now we have our diamond plate with just the diffuse and the painted version. All right, so that is really consistent. So what we need to do is kind of break up that consistency. So one way that we can do that is, let me select some of these lights that I made here and then just remove them from this list. Okay, cool. To break up that painted material, we need to mix in some different things here into our mix shader here. So let's see a way we can do that. Oh yeah, so in Photoshop, let me just open up really quickly. I made a map earlier that was called this path CTL. So basically it's just in the 0-1 space. It's just down the center of that plate. I just painted like a little white path where people would be walking a lot, and then added like a scratch path or a scratch pass to it as well. And what we can do is, since we laid out the UVs for this thing earlier, if we look at the UVs, we laid them out in this direction here, that path is going to map to this section of the plate here. So what I can do is, since that's fine, what I'll do is I'll pull that in here. So I'll hit, let's see, add a file, texture. And this one, we are not going to plug in this diamond plate placement because this, we want this to be in the 0, 1 space. We do not want it to be tiling like the other one was. So let's call this our path CTL. And path CTL here, I load this. And let's just map this directly so you can see what's happening. So this is going to it's going to remove the little diamond plates that we have here and the paint, and it's just going to put it to the center. It's just going to use the path to map the paint versus the metal. You'll see what I mean here when I map this. One thing I need to do is increase the color here. The contrast is not enough yet. So yeah, I'm gonna just, okay, so we can see that it's mapped right now. I put an AI range here and I have it isolate selected. And I'm just making this crunchier. I'm just dragging this out so that I have, it's not really working a little bit, but this AI range is really considered for linear workflow, which I'm not using. So it has this really tight range. Okay, you can kind of see what it's doing. Let's do like 0.1. So bring this in. .03. All right, so you can see it's just mixing the metal and the paint just in that area. But what I want to do is actually mix these two values together. This original one that I had and this one here. So let's do an AI. You can do this in a couple of ways. You can do an AI composite, or you could do a plus minus average. Let's see if this will work. So I'm going to take the out color, put it into the first 3D input, and then take the AI range. Let's turn 4 on this. Take the out color, put it in this. And then I'm going to do a luminance conversion. Plug that into there. Take the out value, put it into here. Now let's see. I'm going to select isolate selected. All right, so we got our plus minus average. For some reason in a plus minus average node, it doesn't give you the isolate select before, but we can see the plus minus average here. So right now it's set to sum, which means that it's adding the values together. So if I have a value of 1 here, and then in this map I have a value of 1 there as well, it'll be added to a value of 2. So if we do an average, it'll average those values out. So let's see what it looks like when we do that. So this is just averaging the values. Now if I did a sum, it's going to add them together. So that we have metal break up here, and then it's like a full range here. So this is actually like a value of 2 or something like that. And then a subtraction, which looks like this. And if we flipped it the other way, this is actually probably around what I want. So let's flip the order here. No, I guess that's not what I wanted. Flip this order back. Oh, you know what I want to do is actually flip this order. We can make an AI range. Let's see how I can do this. Put the out value into this input, take the out color, put it in the conversion. Okay, and then if I flipped this min in, min out, this should flip the image. I'm correct. Actually not doing what I thought. Okay, so anyway, I mean, you're gonna have to figure out what your mixing order is and all that stuff. That can be a pain in the butt to figure out sometimes. So for now, for that subtract is doing some weird math, so we're gonna use sum for now. And then now that I have the sum here, I can go back to this AI range and I can start increasing this down a little bit so that it mixes a little more reasonably. And you can just mess with this value and put some other values in there. Like for these edges here, you could add another map that like kind of increases the amount of paint that's on the edge portion of that. So let's move around a little bit. You can see the center part of it is that like full metal, and then the outer edges is kind of what we had before. All right, so let's just for the final part of this, so the video doesn't get too long, I'm just gonna go in and add this final plate rust. So I'm gonna select my bare metal painted mix, the final one, go to the diamond plate rust, and I'm going to add it. Oh, I guess it was already added from earlier. All right, so what we want to do is we want to daisy chain an additional mix material. So I'm going to make an AI mix shader, another one. And let's take the out color, put it into shader 2, take the out color of our bare metal painted mix, put it into shader 1. All right, awesome. So let's name this. And we'll call this bare painted rust mix. These names are getting ridiculous now. Okay. So I'm just going to, I'm not deleting these, I'm just hiding them. Okay, so you probably could delete them, but I get a little bit afraid about deleting shader groups because it usually causes issues for some reason. So be careful about what you delete. Anyway, all right, so we have our bare painted rust mix material. Now we need a mixer for this. So let's add a file texture. And let's see, I have a rust control. So I have some scratches and some other things. So originally I'd shown you just to make this one, but I went back at some point and I added some different layers to it to add a little bit more interest. All right, and then I'm going to take the R channel because this takes a single channel. And let's select our diamond plate, and then we want to assign that to viewport. All right, turn this on. Oh, one thing we need to do, let's pause that. We need to hook up our diamond plate placement because we need it to be the same scale as everything else. So I'll just delete that. Take the output UV, put it in here. All right, play that again. Okay, one thing we need to do is flip that signal. So I probably just did the order incorrectly. So let's just, you could either flip the order or you can go into the file here and you could go to the channel box here. It says invert. You can just hit 1 and that will invert that texture. So if I did an isolate select, so that's, I just inverted the image. And that should now give us rust on these areas. All right. Let's do an AI range. Map that again. Okay, I'm going to turn on this isolate select again, and it's just so I can see what I'm doing here. So the black areas is going to be no paint, and then the white areas is going to be where the rust is. I'm just trying to find a value of rust that I'm happy with. Yeah, just like a little bit of rust. I don't want it to be all over the place. I'm not super happy with the way that metal is looking, actually. The bare metal. But what's nice about this workflow is that now that I have all this stuff hooked up, I can start manually manipulating each layer. So say I go back just to the bare metal material and I wanted to, let's see, let's break the connection for that metalness and turn the metalness all the way up. Turn the weight up a little. You can just kind of see like where the breakup's coming from. It just adds like visual interest. And one nice thing about once you have your material like this, is that since this is like kind of a procedural workflow, I can create new objects. Let's make this sphere here. I'm gonna smooth this once. And I'm just gonna add some very quick UVs. So camera-based projection. I kind of know what I'm looking for already, so I don't need to do too crazy. So do the UV editor here. Just really quickly lay out the UVs. Unfold. Make this down a little bit. Okay. Whoop. All right, so if I smooth this thing, let's add the existing material and we want to put the bare metal. Actually, let's do the metal switch and I'll do something cool with that metal switch now. Why is my attribute editor in there? Yeah, hold on. Accidentally added that all in. Go to my Hypershade. So I still have my switch. So let's do the metal switch node. And this will be something cool. So where's my metal switch? Here it is. I'll map that. And now I will map my bare painted. I'll just put every single one of these in and map just the nodes. So I have my bare metal, my rust, my painted, which all three of those are already mapped. Now what I can do is I can map the other ones into those other inputs. So now I have every stage mapped into this metal switch. Now what I do is I can click on this, go to assign existing, metal switch, assign existing, metal switch. Now both of these materials have the metal switch attached to them. If I play it, go to my Hypershade here, let's click on my metal switch. Now if I pull my attribute editor from metal switch over here, I have the bare input, the painted input, the rust input, the painted mix, and then the bare painted rust mix. So now I can switch through every single one. So I go to 1, here's the bare metal, here's the painted, here's the rust, here's the bare metal painted mix, and then finally the very last one, which is the painted mix with the painted mix with the hold on a second, let me delete this. Okay, there we go. The bare painted rust mix. Okay, cool. That way you can just switch back and forth between all of them. This switch node is really cool, and you could use this to drive some cool variation functions. So now that we have that all set up, I can go back to my diamond plate paint, and if I went back to my diamond plate diffuse color correct, and let's see, I'll click that, and I start messing with the color, it's interactively changing the color and keeping everything else intact. So this is like a very cool way to work, because if you work like this, you can go back and change something and your entire material still is built all the way up. And then you could, you know, just drive all kinds of different attributes and do different cool stuff with it. One thing I got to do is, let's go to the attributes for this thing, because this needs, I'm going to go to its shape node, Arnold shape node, and we need to turn on the subdivisions for this. I'll turn this to, I think this can be a value 1 because we messed with the final settings. Update the scene here. All right, cool. So now we've got this whole thing working. Awesome. And you could, once you got this, you can make another one. And then if you just change the UV settings a little bit, like if you just scooted it a little bit, let's see what that does. It'll just like kind of modify. One thing this needs, we need to move this light a little bit further away. Turn the cone angle. These other objects weren't really getting cast to this light. Let's see. All right, so now we have all those materials on these objects, and this sphere is not fantastically UV'd, so that's why it looks kind of messed up. But cool, now we have these panels, and you can do different stuff to it. Honestly, you wouldn't want to do that to those UVs. What you could do is just flip these or something, or if you wanted to change the direction, make it go this way, you can do that. Just a way that you can, you know, modify this single shader work and kind of do some other stuff. So, all right, we could also do some stuff with curvature and ambient occlusion and things like that. But I think this is good enough just to show you like the basic workflow of adding, you know, a few different types of materials together into one final material, and then being able to switch back and forth between them. All right, I'll see you in the next one.